Welcome to the B2B Breakthrough Podcast. We're here to bring you all the best knowledge, insights, and strategies from e-commerce experts, successful business owners, and the team at Alibaba.com that you'll need to grow your business and achieve your next big breakthrough. I'm your host, Sharon Gai. Welcome to the podcast. So this is our 11th episode, but our very first in-person episode. Just to give you a bit of a recap and to all of our listeners, this podcast, we are trying to teach people who are currently entrepreneurs or who want to become entrepreneurs and how to grow their business, mostly from a B2B, B2C commerce perspective. And so today we're here with Vivek Rama and Eric Lee in person, the pioneers behind Superline Wholesale, an apparel wholesale company that gives creative access to blank garments to repurpose and rebrand as their own. By combining their experience in growth marketing, digital commerce, apparel sourcing, and design, Eric, Vivek, and the rest of the Superline Wholesale team have created a unique brand that has massive growth potential. So let's start off with just Superline Wholesale and what's behind the name.
I was a college dropout. I didn't have anything to do. And my dad was like, why don't you come work for me in the warehouse? And he was selling bootleg Jordan tees. It's like a traditional wholesaler. So I started working in the warehouse, like trying to figure it out. And I was like, I don't want to sell bootleg Jordan tees for the rest of my life. And slowly I started a brand. I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to be like Fear of God and all these other designers like John Elliott. And I want to have this crazy high brand. So I started my brand. It was terrible. I think my first shirt, I misspelled the word on the back design. And I didn't know like anything about Photoshop, Illustrator. And from there, I took all those experiences and I started channeling those experiences into teaching people how to start a brand. And I was like, oh, if I can show somebody how to get shirts printed or where to get the shirts, what other products could I sell to them? And then that's when my dad was like, blanks, there's no risk in blanks. A black t-shirt will sell for the rest of your life. Whereas if you have something printed on there, it could be worth like Hellstar's worth $200 a shirt, but then you can go down the street and buy a $5 I Love New York shirt, right? So it's so predicated on like the design and the graphic. And my dad was like, Hellstar could sell for $200 today, but tomorrow it could sell for nothing. So he was like, why don't you start selling blanks? And that's kind of how I started changing that business from selling bootleg Jordan t-shirts to selling blank t-shirts and then eventually blank hoodies, blank zip-ups. And now we focus more so on like the fashion blanks. So a lot of these other companies, you can get a black t-shirt, but you're probably not going to be able to get, I call them the misunderstood pieces that the kids wear, like crop tops. And then Vivek is the director of digital. So he handles more of the media side, if you want to talk about that.
I handle all of the content like TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube.
I saw a lot of your TikTok interviews with factory owners. You went everywhere in China.
So we actually weren't in China. We went to a trade show in the US. I was asking people for advice. I met one of the owners of Young and Reckless. I was telling him like, I'm doing merch for people. I'm doing like the corporate internships. Don't really like my job. It's like, you need to find Eric Lee. Tracked down Eric Lee, went to my high school, 10 years older than me. We met at a trade show and we just shot Eric talking to a factory person.
On an iPhone.
That video we did, 1 million views. And then Eric was like, why don't you do work for me on the side during your job? Fast forward, I quit my job.
That was your basically job interview. And then you got the job.
Yeah, that's how it started.
Can you just take us back to how you got started? So you said that growing up, were you working for your dad? Were you one of his employees? And that's how you got into the whole way of knowing how to sell things?
You left out a big portion of your story, I feel like.
I was 18 and I went to Jesus camp for like 6 months because I was like getting in trouble. I was partying all the time. I was flunking out of school. And I was like, man, I do not want to be broke. And I was like, I also don't want to go to school. So I came back and I started working as a waiter. And I was like, this is tough. And I just found myself selling things that I shouldn't be selling. New York is probably fine to sell it, but back where I'm from in Atlanta, it's not fine. And I was like, I can make a lot of money selling this stuff. And I did it for about like 4 or 5 years. And I worked for a lot of people that are probably like very opposite from corporate and like quote unquote scary, I guess. And I got in trouble and I was like, man, what am I going to do? I have a record. I'm a college dropout.
Wasn't it hard to get a job?
I remember one time I went on Craigslist to find a job. And I was like so amped up and I was like, I got a suit and everything. And then I forgot my dress shoes. I pull up to the interview and it's one of those when you sell like cell phones in Costco. I was so amped up for it. I went from like selling Jesus to like applying to sell cell phones in Costco. I don't want to sell cell phones at Costco. And my dad was like, why don't you just come work for me in the warehouse?
So he was doing pretty well with his business.
He was doing well, but it was just like really small business. It's like, imagine like the guy running a bodega here. He can afford to feed his family, send his kid to school. Is he having bust down watches and like crazy chains and like flying private? No. But he's working 6 days a week and just working hard and being able to feed his family.
He has a shop?
Yeah, it's like a wholesaler. So he would sell to like flea markets. He would sell to mall stores, like the smaller mall stores, chain stores. When you go to like the gas station and they sell you t-shirts, he would sell those shirts to the gas station owner. But he had no social media. They didn't even have a POS system. Everything is like a calculator and paper. He's just a classic immigrant story. Growing up, I had to read the letters that come in the mail because he didn't know, like, what is this? How do I pay this? So he doesn't even really speak English that well. So for him, coming from a different country at age 35, even just being able to do what he's been able to do is an accomplishment. Essentially, he paved the way for me so that I can go and make TikToks.
So then you started working for him. And then what were the first couple of days like? Did you just get it because you kind of grew up with it?
No, I went through 5 years of terrible. At the time, I was like 22. So all my friends are getting like their corporate gigs where they're making $70,000, $80,000 a year. They're getting to move to whatever city. And I'm sitting in a warehouse making like $12 an hour moving boxes. And I was like, my life is terrible.
What would make you want to continue doing that?
If it sucks, you want to get out of that place. I lived in my mom's house. I didn't have any money. The highlight of my day was I would come home and eat like 12-piece lemon pepper wings. And I was like, I don't want to live my life like this. That's when I started my brand. I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to go from being a college dropout to I'm going to be a big brand owner one day.
Was it just like a moment that lightning just struck you and then you were like, I'm going to set out on my own brand path? Or was it like a inspirational video that you saw? Because I've definitely heard a lot of these stories where people go through sort of their trenches.
Yeah.
And then there's like a moment or something that happens and their life just completely swings the other way. Things just come together. They just bounce back.
I was on house arrest for a year. The way it works is you can go from 9 to 6 p.m. You can be outside and like you can live your life. But after 6, you have to come home. And it was more of like a gradual step by step. I think a lot of people look for like this one epiphany moment where, oh, I watched a David Goggins video and my life changed and now I'm working out every day. I think it's more so of like waking up every day and making that decision and then just slowly progressing. Like when I was on house arrest, if I want to do this, I need to learn Photoshop. I need to learn Adobe Illustrator. I need to know Premiere Pro. I need to learn about Shopify. So a lot of these things I just sat and I didn't have any other option. Like all my friends were Friday night partying or going out. I had an ankle monitor on. So it's like, I'm trapped inside this house. I have nothing to do.
Yeah.
I'm like, I might as well learn a new skill. Again, I think the most important thing is it's a day-to-day decision, right? I think a lot of the younger kids out there, they're like, it's one thing. It's a serendipitous moment where like the angels will come down and bless. I don't think it's like that. I think it's actually really ugly. And it's waking up every day and saying, you know what? I don't feel great. I don't feel motivated, but I'm going to still do what I need to do to get to where I want to go. And I think it's an accumulation of that.
And then you eventually got out of house arrest and you were able to go to a trade show to meet Vivek.
This is the part that's probably gets skipped over is like the most boring part. And then when I met Vivek, I was coming out of figuring it out to where we had 100,000 on Instagram. I was doing months where I was selling over $100,000, starting to have staff, a team. And I was like, this is starting to work. It started to become like a real business where I could afford to pay people and they could live off of that.
So the brand shirt was really successful.
From a guy coming out of house arrest to making $100,000 a month, that felt like this is actually a thing. It can be something too. And that's kind of when I feel like there was a lot of like good timing was when I met Vivek at a trade show. And I was going to the trade show just to buy more merchandise. And I brought my little brother with me and he was, you should just interview these factories. And then that's when I ran into him.
And you were at the trade show for your own reasons too.
Yeah, so I was
Your own brand.
I started a brand when I was 16. It didn't go anywhere, but I would go to those trade shows. My family is in the retail business. So the trade show has like two parts. There's one part where people with retailers go to buy brands. And then there's a part where all the factories are. So I would go to the trade show. I went for the first time when I was 19. And I basically took my parents' pass and I would go to the factory section. And throughout college, I was like doing merch for people on YouTube. I really like knew what Eric was building and I understood it because I was doing merch for people. I understood the blank space. And then, like you said, it was just perfect timing. I got a job in New York, really didn't like my job because I was working in makeup.
Worked at L'Oreal.
Yeah, L'Oreal was a great place to work, but I'm into clothes.
So then you didn't like the corporate life. But then I guess you were always running your own thing at the same time.
Yeah. And then when I came into Eric's business, I had always been using Shopify. I had done like merch drops for people where we had done like 100,000 in one day. And I logged into a Shopify and I was like, what are you doing? I realized he had such a big business, but then there were things that were so obvious that I would be doing if I were him. The shippings, like for example, if somebody ordered one shirt, for some reason it would cost $20 to ship that shirt. Like they were being charged $20. One of the first things I did was like segment his shipping, like 0 to 4 pounds, 4 to 9 pounds, 9 pounds plus. Little things like he wasn't using Slack. He was texting everybody. He was taping poly mailers. I'm like, why are you taping poly mailers? Because I had done all these things on a smaller scale. And then it was just like perfect timing. I had always wanted to own like a big Shopify store. So it was almost like I was living through what he built. His business was already there. Right now on Instagram, we have 850,000. He had already built it up to 100,000.
So it sounds like you are like the marketing guru because you obviously know how to build a brand that speaks to people.
I'd say I learned a lot of marketing from him too. I think I'm more of a sales guy. I sell. I think we're both marketers, but I learned a lot of technical hard skills too, like video editing.
Eric is really, really good at sales. Like you said, like being the character. And then I was really good at just optimizing what he already had. Like, oh, we should edit it this way. And then it just helped in the long run.
Also, was it the same brand that you built or are these like interchanging? Is that one brand called Superline?
We've been trying to figure it out. We had a brand where it was a blanks brand, like Solid Basics, that sold within Superline, the distributor. But last 2 years, we kind of ditched everything. We're just focusing just on Superline. And what it is essentially is we just sell blanks. Blank t-shirts, blank hoodies, blank hats. And the audience that buys our stuff is people that want to rebrand it
With their own brand.
Yeah, whether it's a clothing brand or even like gyms that need merch. We have tattoo artists. We have music producers, rappers for the record labels.
So we sell other blank companies, but then we also have our own in-house brand that we manufacture as well.
But the side of the business that's bigger is the more wholesale.
So that's what we blew up off of is we're in the middle of both worlds. So most of the other wholesalers out here, they require like, you got to have this paperwork, you got to hit this minimum. And essentially they only want to work with like the corporate companies of the world. When Coca-Cola gets uniforms or employee uniforms, that's the audience that they want to go for. They don't really want to pick up the phone for the, hey, I'm a 16-year-old kid, I want to start a clothing brand. That's our core audience. And out of there are millions of 16-year-old kids who don't make clothing brands. And then there are some that really succeed and they make a living off of it. And they buy Lamborghinis and chains. So we have everybody in between, but that's really our core audience. It's not so much the Coca-Colas or the corporate companies.
You're basically saying anybody who's walking a non-traditional path.
Yeah. You know, when you walk outside and you're like, why are you wearing that? Like the craziest stuff, right? That's where a lot of the fashion stems from too, you know, like even how corporate people dress, those kids are the ones that set the tone and then the trends kind of follow after that. So that's our audience.
Let's dive into that a bit more, like trends and trend setting and how something becomes a trend, because I would love to figure that out. I mean, I think everybody would. So what's another example where somebody has worn something kind of strange?
We have double jeans.
What's that?
Imagine a pair of jeans that are flipped inside out. Yeah. And then we have another pair of jeans sewed to that. So it looks like one pair of jeans falling off, or even like really baggy wide jeans.
Yeah.
It's like if you wouldn't be able to wear some of our clothes to a corporate function, it would be considered as business casual. It's probably like what you would wear on a Friday night when you go out with your friends and you're staying out till 4 a.m.
That inside out jean, the person that wore that, they can wear that, but they'd be like the one loner person wearing that walking down the street. And if everybody else is like, this person is just freaking weird, then that's something that doesn't take off. So not everything that is avant-garde does take off.
I agree.
But if we look at the macro picture, at what points do you think somebody does do that and it does take off versus not?
I think like Virgil is like a perfect example. Because there's a guy that wore the double jeans and he's just so misunderstood that he's not even on earth. It won't ever connect to regular people in everyday society. But I think in that world, there are people that can go from that misunderstood to back to understood and communicate that and take reference points from there and maybe not go so crazy with the products.
You have to be like in the middle, be a little different, but like not too much.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's like taking that jean and making it more mainstream. So like toning it down a little. I think for us, when we see a bunch of clothing brands starting to use like that specific garment, we're like, oh, this is going to go. If you want to talk about like the 2-panel tee, I think that's a perfect example.
Oh, yeah. So we made a 2-panel tee where essentially, you know, a shirt has a front, a back, and then a sleeve. Well, the 2-panel tee is just the front and the back. There's no sleeves. So it's just like a regular shirt, but there's no panel. Stuff like that is, I feel like the misunderstoods first, they're like super boxy and like it almost looks like a cape, but we kind of dumbed it down to make it look like a regular shirt a little bit. I think that's where the trends live. And even fidget spinners, who would have thought?
Who started that trend?
Yeah.
Do you know that fidget spinner that's like not a fidget spinner, but like the thing that you pop?
Yes.
He's like, I'm the guy behind that fad. It's hard to know who is the person behind one of those trend products. Because I feel, especially in the fashion space or the apparel space, if you buy too much of something in that specific trend and it doesn't take off, then you're on the hook for all of that inventory that you then have to kill through. So I feel like in that space, you almost always have to be on top of where the trends are.
Yeah. We call it stinky fish, like leftover inventory.
Okay.
Smells. You go to the warehouse and it's sitting there, it starts to smell and it starts to rot.
What were some of your stinky fish shit?
The tech fleece. I mean, my dad's whole business was stinky fish,
Like Island, New York, like that's pretty classic.
but it's not like what it used to be.
So you went to this trade show first, prior to meeting Alibaba.com. When did Alibaba.com come into the picture?
So when I first got into like this space and I was starting a brand, the first place I went to was Alibaba. We went to a convention last weekend in Atlanta and we were interviewing these brand owners and we were like, how'd you make this? One guy was like, Alibaba. He went on this whole spiel about how you should use Alibaba. And that's how I got into sourcing. And then I think after Alibaba, that's when I started going to like trade shows.
Who was the first manufacturer that you bought from?
I don't remember the name, but it was like some factory in Pakistan. It didn't go well.
What did you make?
I made hoodies with like a chain as like the drawstring. And then we found another factory on Alibaba and that factory was good. I did a lot of packaging stuff on Alibaba as well, like custom poly mailers, custom boxes.
How do you use that platform today?
I mean, I think it's more so about the culture and the customer that Alibaba has created. If you think about, I want to start a brand or I want to be an entrepreneur, anything that's based around product, it's kind of like the Alibaba culture of like going online, finding a factory overseas, coming up with an idea, importing it, and then buying it for X and then marketing it up and selling it and making a profit, right? So I haven't used any Alibaba products now, but I think essentially the whole business of Superline is based around the entire culture that Alibaba has created, which again, is like these younger kids that before the internet, how did you source stuff? I know a guy that knows a guy and knows a guy, right? And there's not as much trust in between those connections. Whereas with Alibaba, they make everything seamless. That product helped these younger kids go from like, I want to just be an athlete or I want to be an entertainer to, you know what, I want to own my own clothing brand or I want to be an entrepreneur. And I think Alibaba is culturally relevant to entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs.
And it's really important for the kids who like can't go to these trade shows. We went to Co-Create and we were talking to some of the factories there. And then we would go to some of the informal market shows. And one thing I realized is all of those factories are on Alibaba. So if you can't go to the trade shows, the great way to connect with factories is through Alibaba.com.
If so much of what you're doing now is other people coming to you, like your product has to not break. The seams have to never, come together. Like the quality has to be there for everyone to come to you for that. Did you have to go through a lot to dig to that supplier or manufacturer to like find that perfect white t-shirt that will stand through time and quality and just like the QA test from all these other brands?
What's funny is we actually got a shipment of hoodies the other day that rip. They're sulfur dyed, so they're like damaged. I'm sure the people at Louis Vuitton and like those higher end stores, they have better quality control. With us, we're on the lower end. We're selling wholesale. We're trying to hit a certain price point. It's not always pretty, and every product isn't always perfect. But at least for our business and the market that we're in, it's more so about just pushing through. And I think the most important thing is having a relationship with your factory, letting them know you sold me faulty stuff and working out a middle ground and a solution. What helps with that is if you don't have a connection or a relationship with the factory, it's really hard for you to meet another factory online and have that trust. Whereas Alibaba kind of vets that entire process for you. And if you do have any problems, they kind of work as a middleman. So you can contact the platform and they can either justify it or get them removed or whatever. So I think that's really good for people starting out, where it's hard to get that relationship, right? Like some of those relationships takes years and it's passed down to families and generations. Alibaba makes it kind of more accessible.
You ever use your dad's contacts from before?
Yeah, so now the business has grown to where we have so many contacts because like one factory can only produce so much. And if we're trying to grow and sell more stuff, we went to the Alibaba trade show, met some factories. I think it was like Healy, they do jerseys. So what you also learn is certain factories are specific to certain products. The guy who's making good soccer jerseys necessarily can't make the best jean shorts. Now the business has grown to like we're having relationships with like 5 to 10 factories and producing on a major scale. And that comes with a lot of headache.
Did you ever go to China to visit these factories?
I did. I went when I was starting out. I didn't have a lot of money. I learned in my prior business, if you want to get good margins, you got to go to the source. So I hopped on like a 14-hour plane ride, 6-hour train ride.
What year was that?
I got to say it was maybe 5-6 years ago.
Before the pandemic.
Yeah, before the pandemic.
You could actually go into China.
Yeah, it was crazy. With Alibaba, you could skip all that.
What city were you in?
I went to Guangzhou and then I went from there to, I don't know where it was, but it was where the factory actually was. And that was like a 6-hour train ride there. And it's just like an entirely different life. Going out to New York and then going somewhere to there is like a night and day.
I saw a lot of your videos where I think somebody was making a sweatshirt and then you were parsing out like, this is the sleeve for the sweatshirt. Were those pieces of footage taken from China?
Yeah, so our most viral video, well, actually we have a video more viral than that now, but at the time it hit 10 million views. It was like our most viral thing. And Eric just sent me a video of him like GSM testing a hoodie. So it's basically...
What does GSM mean?
GSM is grams per square meter. So essentially, a lot of factories will send you like something that's 200 GSM and you might weigh it and it might be like 100 GSM. And
so it might be thinner
than
what you want. You want it to be a heavier fabric.
So he sent me a video of him just doing the GSM test. It was funny because the day before he chewed me out for something. It was the first time we ever like got in an argument.
We call that work-life balance in the corporate.
The first time like we got in an argument, this happened the next day. So he sent me the footage and then I don't know why I edited it the way I did. So in short form, the first 3 seconds are like the most important because that's what really like hooks the person. So it's just like a zoom in of this GSM cutter cutting the fabric. For some reason, it went super viral. It got 10 million views on YouTube, TikTok.
And he edited it in a Starbucks in 10 minutes.
He's efficient. It's part of the technical job, the optimization. I think sometimes those videos go viral because you're showing a side of like clothing making or something that nobody has ever seen before. And like, we just see it in stores when we walk into Uniqlo and we don't know how it's made, where it came from, how it's put together. What are some other videos that's gone viral?
All of the factory interviews, like I feel like we invented a new niche. There's a lot of other kids starting to do the same type of videos. I would say that's like our most successful series so far.
I mean, what would be your advice to somebody watching about short form content and like creating content for their business in general?
I would say provide as much value as you can to the audience. Don't worry about like selling something in the video. Like if you look at Red Bull's Instagram, for example, like Red Bull doesn't post any pictures of a Red Bull can or like talk about the product. They just post like X Games and like exciting stuff. And that's like a big inspiration for our page. Like our page is just knowledge for clothing brand owners. Like we post competitor stuff, we post our stuff, we post memes, we post everything. And I would just think about your business instead of trying to sell a product. Instead, think about like who is your audience and how can you provide value to that niche and that audience.
And what would your advice be for someone wanting to start their own brand?
Don't do it.
Isn't that what most of your business is based on, though? People doing it?
Yeah, but essentially it's such a saturated market. There's low level of success. For every 10 person that comes in there, maybe 1 or 2 will actually be able to make like a living. And out of those 1 or 2, like maybe 1 will be able to buy a Maybach.
Maybe not everybody's goal is to do that, but maybe some of their goal is just to grow to somewhere where they're not making 100K a month, but maybe 10, 20K a month, and just be able to live off.
I think that's another reason why our page does so well is Eric's persona and just how he is before I was even working at Superline, I saw a video and he literally said that he was like 9 out of 10 of you that buy stuff from us are not going to succeed. And that's what makes people love us even more because he's just like real.
I agree. That might not be everyone's goal. I just look at things through the lens of like what I want in life, I guess. But I do agree. I think there are customers that come and for them, it is a hobby. It is a way for them to work their 9 to 5 and then after work be able to create something and have like creative output. So I understand that. It's the same way as somebody making music. Not everyone that makes music wants to be Elvis Presley. Some people just want to make music. It's like a therapeutic thing for them. So I think that's the same with clothes.
Brand building is such a complicated, vast thing. Would you cut it down into a couple of pillars that people have to concentrate on to build their own brand? And if so, what would those be?
I think you just got to care about what you're doing and find a reason for why people need what you're doing.
Find your why. You say that a lot.
I think if your why is like, hey, I just want to make a lot of money, I think at some point you're going to sell out or you're going to burn out. You're not going to be able to push through. But if you have a purpose and a reason why, and then that reason resonates with other people, I think that's kind of the start of a brand. I mean, if you look at brands like Louis Vuitton, Chanel, it's like that bag resonates with so many people. And that logo and that symbol, it resonates with so many people.
I think Louis Vuitton is a bit of a different case, maybe. And feel free to disagree because, first of all, it's in luxury. So ownership of that thing represents a little something different versus like a brand that you see and like that's more en masse. Also, Louis Vuitton has like the 100-year-old heritage history.
I think with Louis, the brand value is that when you put it on, you got something on that no one else got on. It's aspirational, it's inspirational, it's almost like a status symbol, right? Even lower tier brands like even TJ Maxx, Ross, you go there for a certain why. What your why is like. You want to find the clearance section, you want to find that grail that is a really nice shirt for $5. Even when you go to Walmart, there's a certain why that you're kind of catering towards. So I think for every brand, finding your why and then having people to try to resonate with it is the genesis point. And then I think from there, you can start to build out who's the audience.
Yes. And you find your why through the audience. Like I would say our why at Superline is like when I first started working with Eric, one thing he told me is anything we put out, make it for the 17-year-old version of yourself who is starting a clothing brand. And I think that's why the content has worked so well, the products have worked so well, is because we were those 17-year-old kids trying to start a clothing brand. And it just happens to be the right place, right time. There's millions of kids trying to start clothing brands.
Can you give examples of some of those brands?
I mean, they're more like underground, I guess. Saint Vanity, he's in a lot of like the Hellstar denim tiers, sort of like boutique stores. God is Dope had his really big run. So God is Dope was big in the South. It's more of like a price point brand. They were selling like $20 shirts. Jesus Loves You is another one. We've had a lot of celebrities come in and they're trying to do like their merch through there. The ones that end up being successful out of the store, they are laser focused on like what the brand is. Even with Saint Vanity, he's not selling his shirts for $20. He understands that his brand is on the levels of like denim tiers, Hellstar. It's more of a luxury streetwear brand where, hey, if you want this shirt, you're going to pay $200 for it. And I'm not budging on my price because it's more about my brand than the actual product. And then guys like God is Dope, he was the exact opposite. My brand isn't for the guy that wants to be dripped out in like the most exclusive pieces. My brand is for like the aunt and uncle who go to church on Sundays and they want a dope message. And they don't want to spend $50 on a shirt. They would want to spend $9.99, $14.99. So I think just being clear, knowing your audience and staying in that lane is the ones that succeed. I think the ones that don't succeed are very unfocused and like drop a $9 shirt and then a $100 shirt and they're kind of scattered.
Do you think it's momentously harder for more newer age luxury brands to be sold these days? Like if I was somebody who wanted to start my own clothing brand and I want to go that luxury route, I want to have more exclusive pieces. I don't want to mass produce like thousands. I just want to do certain drops or capsules that are very, very limited. Do you think it's so much harder or cut out so much harder for me than if I wanted to be a more aunts and uncles wearing at the church?
I
version?
Personally don't think it's harder. It's just a different game you're playing. Like there are luxury brands that have been born in the last like 10 years, like Hellstar, and they're like super, super successful. I think it's just a different game and it's like your circumstances. Like if you're a kid and you're like friends with all these rappers and athletes, like it might be easier for you. But if you have no connections, making a luxury brand out of nothing is pretty hard because I feel like a lot of luxury is association and image, which is harder to do if you don't know anybody.
What do you think is next for your brand?
We're trying to discover that here on this trip too.
Are you going to be visiting certain stores or visiting certain brands to find that answer?
We're meeting with a lot of like other creators. We're trying to meet with people that are smarter than us so we can ask a lot of questions. We've figured out that like the brand can almost be almost a media conglomerate too, in a way. It doesn't always have to be around product. That's what we're really trying to explore this trip is how can the Superline Wholesale Instagram, YouTube serve as more of like a blog, a magazine versus like, hey, this is the marketing department for selling our hoodies that rip. Instead of like doing that, we want to figure out, Is this a separate entity? Is it an immediate thing? So we're actually coming on this trip with a lot of questions and looking for answers.
If you can give yourself a piece of advice when you were 18, what would you say to?
You want to go first?
I would just say don't rush. I feel like especially with kids now, it's even worse because they see like 14-year-olds with like luxury cars and like just doing crazy shit on social media. So I would just say don't rush. It's going to work out. The work you may be doing now, it might seem like useless, but at the end, like it'll all connect. Like Steve Jobs has a cool quote about you can't connect the dots going forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. And I think I would say that don't rush.
I would say just get uncomfortable. Anytime you're in a place of comfort, I think you're stagnant, you're not growing, you're not learning. And even if you are making mistakes, as long as you're uncomfortable and you're trying new things, I think eventually if something will happen, and then you just have to keep repeating that and learning and growing. When I was younger, I kept thinking like, oh, if I made this amount of money or if I got to this point, my life would be complete. The older I get, the more I realize that goal is always shifting. It's more about pursuing the goal than the actual goal. Whatever your idea of happiness and like making it is, I think that doesn't exist. I think it's a constantly evolving thing. If your goal is to have more work-life balance, I think even that will start to change once you achieve that. And I think there's just always a pursuit of like going after something versus like, once you get to this point, you'll be good. I used to think that all the time as a kid, and that's what I would tell myself. Even like the Amazon worker, I'm sure there's a lot of Amazon workers that are comfortable in the warehouse and hot, right? So getting uncomfortable with that would be like, yo, why don't you go read a book? Why don't you listen to a podcast? Instead of going to the warehouse, why don't you learn a new skill, right? Uncomfortability can work kind of both ways. Whereas maybe even the corporate guy who's read a book and has a college degree and is looking for this crazy coding job, hey, why don't you get your hands dirty for a couple of months till you get to that point? So I think uncomfortability is kind of like, whatever side you're on, there's always uncomfortability on either side. And I think there's always more to grow and learn.
The trick is more, there's very few of us who remind ourselves to do that. Because most of us just dive into a habit.
That's human nature. We want to be comfortable. We want to sit down. We want to have AC. We want to be comfortable. But I think it's in moments where you challenge yourself and being uncomfortable, I think that's when you learn more about yourself and grow and develop as a person.
Thanks so much for sharing all this in our first in-person podcast. I hope that this podcast serves as a first step in uncomfortability for whoever is listening.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
B2B Breakthrough is produced by Alibaba.com. To find out how Alibaba.com is empowering its customers with the tools, services, and resources they need to grow their businesses, visit Alibaba.com. And then make sure to search for B2B Breakthrough Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcasts. Make sure to follow us so you don't miss future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Alibaba.com, thanks for listening.